Hello, I'm Soycat, and today I'm going to be giving you a step-by-step guide on how to win a British general election. This is something you might want to do, especially given there is one happening this year, or you might want to know how it's going down, because it's not just one simple election like you might figure, and like some countries do, it's actually 650 local races. So yeah, there are 650 local elections happening in May, and that happens with each general election, and these determine who the Member of Parliaments are going to be. So the Members of Parliament are actually all decided in a winner-take-all system for their local constituency, and there's 650 of these, which means that to win the overall election, you don't win the overall election by having the most votes overall. You win the election by having the most of those individual votes go your way. So you need 326 to have a majority of those 650, but the actual majority needed to form a government, or a majority government, is actually more like 324, because there is the Speaker of the House, a Member of Parliament that's elected but then doesn't vote because he's doing the speaking, and also we've got Sinn Féin, who do not take their seats because they're a Northern Ireland party, and whatever. Basically, there's a party that doesn't take their seats, which means the actual number you need is 323 or 324, and sometimes a bit lower, because of those two things. So you need to win 324 local races, and if you are the party leader of the party who has those larger than half seats, then you become the next Prime Minister, and that's how that works. So yeah, this election is actually 650 elections, and whoever wins the most of those elections becomes the largest party in the legislature, and whoever has the largest party in the legislature is the leader of the executive, also known as largest party gets Prime Minister. Easy stuff like that. That's who is the leader of the country, and that's kind of sorted. So that's easy enough to explain, right? But how which 324 do you win? How do you decide to win this whole thing? Basically, you need to decide which 324 seats you're going to win if you want to become the Prime Minister. Let's assume you become a party leader, because yeah, if you're starting from scratch, you would probably be able to pick the 324 seats with the least population. So if the average number of voters per seat is 68,000, or about 90,000 population, including non-voters per seat, but the some seats have way less, such as some of the Scottish Isles, which have just 20,000. So yeah, if you wanted to pick the easiest way, pathway, and you're starting from scratch, you would pick the that islands with the 20,000. Then you pick some other islands. You'd pick mostly Welsh, Scottish, and then like rural seats, because they generally have slightly fewer voters. That's what you'd do if you're starting from scratch. However, parties aren't starting from scratch. If you did become a party leader of an existing party, you have an existing voter base. Whether that voter base is 36% or it's 30%, or whether it's literally like 0.1%, you're going to have something to start with if you have an existing voter base. So if that is the case, if you're a leader of an existing party, or you're going to work your way up there in the next month or for the next general election, then what you need to do next is you need to work out which seats you have the least votes needed to win from where you are right now. So these are cool. Basically, you need to work out where your most marginal constituencies are. These are kind of like swing seats, where you only need a few votes to swing it from one side to the other. So for instance, there were seats that were won by just 60 votes in the last election. There's been seats that have been won by one vote. If this is a seat that's happened and your party is one vote behind, all you need to do is switch one mind at this next election and hope no one else switches theirs, and you can win that seat. So obviously you have something called marginal constituencies. You have these local races that are most likely to go for your party. These are mostly between the two largest parties, the blue team and the red team, but sometimes they're between the red team and the yellow team, they're between the blue team and the yellow team, and sometimes there's even a couple that are like, red, purple, blue, purple, green, red. There's a lot of there's a lot of splits in terms of how the votes go because of how things are. But they're mostly blue/red constituencies, the two marginal constituencies, the two biggest parties, and this means that to win, you need to get enough votes that you win that one, So let's say you switch 100 minds per constituency, you're only going to win one extra seat. If you switch 1,000 minds per constituency, you're going to win, like a solid 20-30 seats, and this is how you win the election. You need to swing voters over from other parties or that haven't voted before. You need to make them vote, and by winning, getting enough of those to vote for you and denying the other party of the seats, you become the other parties of the seats, you become the largest party, and you get your 324. So how do you convince people to vote for you? It's easy to say, oh, find the seats where people are most likely to vote for you, and then go there and try and do it that. But even once you work that out, how do you get them to vote for you? So this is something I think that you can sum up with your own political theory, but I think everyone can agree that you can either advertise if you believe in finance, because you have around £70,000 per seat that can be spent on advertising, and you can also do a lot of groundwork and just send volunteers out to talk to people and say, look, our guy's really good, go vote for him. So yeah, a lot of seats are won by a really strong ground game, and some seats are won by a really good advertising campaign. Again, you've only got 70,000 per seat, which is actually quite a low amount, and this goes up for rural seats as opposed to urban seats, but you do have a very limited amount per seat that you can spend, and this is set by finance criteria, and it's very strictly enforced. There are, well, you might argue on that front, but it is enforced, and you do have to submit submit returns about every single piece of spending you do. And this means that even though there's 70,000 per seat, this means the countrywide maximum spend is about 20 million. To put that in comparison, by the way, you might think, wow, 20 million, that means the rich buy our election if it costs that much. To put that in comparison, the one of the cheap elections in America for the presidency in 2016 cost 2.5 billion. That was a cheap election. This cost way less than the past couple of ones, and yeah, that's about, you know, what is that, 100 times more, almost, you know, going a little bit more than that. So yeah, that's how cheap our election is. It's mostly not about money, it's mostly about the other things. So okay, if you can only spend so much, and let's say you don't have 20 million to just knock at an election, which again, honestly isn't that much when you really think about it, right? But yeah, let's say you throw your 20 million down, or you don't, whichever solution you have. How do you win votes after that? Well, again, you can go out and ground them. You can say, trust me, our guy's really good, and then you speak to them, or you can use policy, or you can use national campaigning. So policy is to come up with ideas and selling your government with your manifesto, all these other things, to try and you convince people that your party is the best. So this is why there are often lots of you see on both sides. You could see something like, okay, here is a good government policy that's going to give you a thing that you probably like, or hey, we're going to do this thing that everyone wants us to do, or we'll cut your taxes, or whatever it may end up being, whichever end of the spectrum. There's going to be some form of great offer of like, you vote for us, this will happen, like a promise, or like almost like a bribe to the electorate. On both sides, it's like a bribe to the electorate, right? And that's one thing you can do. Or the other thing you can do is go around, nationally campaign, have TV appearances, and just try and show people that you would be a strong leader of the country. Because again, although you might argue this is all about parties, because it is, you know, like the largest party gets elected, it's not necessarily all about parties, because although the largest party wins, it is also about, you know, people are voting for the prime minister, and this means you also need to come across like a good prime minister, which is why the campaigning, which is why the, going on and doing like, TV show interviews and stuff like that, try and convince people that you'd be a good leader for the party, and that the country, and that they should vote for you. And this is why, even though there are 650 local races, it's more of it kind of is like a national election, because we're all gonna be going out and voting and hoping that, one of some number of people will be the prime minister tomorrow, or whenever that actually ends up happening. So yeah, that's how it happens. Whoever wins 324 to 326 people, these individual votes can then win. And if you've just become the largest party, you can do that without even needing a massive share of the vote. If you use all the tactics I've explained so far about the marginal constituencies, about convincing people to vote from the other side to your side, you can win with just 35% of the vote. And indeed, in 2005, the lowest vote share majority government ever, again, Tony Blair, it was 35% of the vote basically, in 2005, and that is all they needed to lead the country. Just 1 in 3 people, 1 in 3 voters even, roughly voting for them, and that's all you actually need because of the first past the post system, where votes are essentially wasted. The moment you do go above the other party, your vote is wasted, which is why there are so many of these marginals, and which is why there is such a big kind of fight for this center grant, that's why there's such a fight for the people between the two parties, because you only need to switch so many over to win, and therefore they only switch so many back to win, and that's why it's such a big fight, and that's why there are so many places, like where I live, and like where you might live statistically, where there's always going to be this big campaign of we need to convince you, and that's why there are some places which are the opposite side of the spectrum and which no one goes to because they're so guaranteed to vote for one party that you just don't do it. So yeah, there you go, use that advice and win 324 seats, and then good job. Guess what? You wake up tomorrow, you see all these elections, one by one, members of parliament are elected, and if you have the most members of parliament, the most MPs, the most of these elections won, then you become the prime minister. But what happens if neither party does it? You might think, okay, well, like 324 is needed. What if one party gets 200, another party gets 200, then the rest are just split up? Or what if 3 parties all get, 217 seats or 216 seats sit? What happens then? What are we going to do about that? Well, what happens in this particular case is something, basically it's one of two things. Either a minority government happens, and the party, despite having less than 324, by being the largest party, you still win the election. Even if you win, even if you won like 200 seats, as long as every other party wins less seats than you, you've still won the election. You have the most seats, you have the imperative to try and form a government first. So you need to form a government. You got 2 options. One is to form a minority government. This means that you essentially try and lead, you can't pass legislature if everyone else disapproves it, but you just hope that everyone else isn't disapproved at the same time, or you try and find support from small parties to be like, look, this thing's good for your people too, vote for it. And it's called, supplying confidence. There's a bunch of ways you can do this, but minority governments do exist from time to time. And the other way, equally rare, because most parties do win the majority, which is rare in the UK system. But yeah, the other way you can do this is you can actually form a coalition. So the most famous coalition is the 2010 coalition between the blue team and the yellow team. in the UK, and this was a pretty infamous coalition. So a lot of people think the whole tuition fees thing was the big deal of it, but the truth is, coalitions are disastrous for the smaller party, and the moment Team Yellow joined the coalition, this made their voters feel betrayed, and like, wait, we voted for change, and we got the people that we didn't want, and basically what this led to is it led to a coalition government which destroyed the minority party, which is why coalition isn't really a viable option. So yeah, how do you win a British general election? What you want to do is you want to become a party leader of one of the parties. Then you need to convince people that are not voting for you already to vote for you in at least 324 local races. Then you need to go and form a government unless you've got less than 324, in which case you need to just say, oh, oops, we can't do it. So yeah, that's how you win a British general election. Hope you all enjoy the video. Second channel, don't care. Bye.